welcome along to the live edition of You Are My Borough. It's transfer deadline day. I'm tempted to say, or as it's otherwise known, Monday. We're not quite at that point. There is going to be a little bit to talk about, although maybe not quite as much as it was looking like earlier in the week. So we'll get through to that. If you're watching on YouTube, then get in the comment section, fire us anything you want to know, any questions, any talking points, give us a shout. We'll drop them in and we'll obviously keep the chat going. We're going to be on for 20 minutes or so. We'll run through everything that's happening. Myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw from the Northern Echo. If you're listening on the various podcast platforms, then give us a rate and review. Now, before we start, I know there's a lot of transfer stuff. I know we're going to talk transfers, but before we start, correspondence, bit of correspondence. I want to read out a letter that we've had through, an actual letter, not emails, not social media DMs, an actual letter to Scott and Dom. Thanks for the great content on You Are My Borough. Already we're flying. Just a little something to pass the time in the office or in the press box. Love the service station chat. Reminds me of the ones I've visited following the Borough away. Keep up the fantastic work, lads. Johnny. And Johnny has literally come up trumps. Service station top trumps. I mean, come on. Now, it's transfer deadline day. This is a live vid. We're on a bit of a time constraint. Next time we do a proper You Are My Borough, it is going to start with a game of service station top trumps, because this is mind-blowingly good. Mind-blowingly good. I'll run you through the categories. I'm not going to take all the others, I promise. Price, yeah. Ambience. I've never, there's an interesting one.
Well, just to put in, I had a stop at Leeds, Skelton Lake on the way back from Liverpool the other night. Touch of class there in terms of ambience, isn't it? Yeah. Birch on the way down.
Yeah, that's textbook. Cleanliness, food outlets, parking spaces. I mean, there you go. What more do you need? I have had a good look through, and we'll leave it for a vid. We have to get off this, but we're now about 5 minutes in. There's been nothing other than service station chat. TB second. Really? I thought it was nailed on that TB is generally held, isn't it, to be the holy grail of service stations. Anybody who's on this or anybody who's going to comment on the vid later, number one is a shock. I think I've been there once. It's not a common one for Borough away trips, but there are Borough away trips where you could conceivably have been to this service station.
Is it Peter?
That's what I'm going to say.
It's interesting. It's car parking. For me, car parking is never an issue. There's never a shortage of car parking spaces. It's access to the car park. Service stations are so complex, or more complex than they should be in terms of actually getting into the car park. That'd be
potentially what should come into that as well is proximity to the actual motorway.
Yeah, that's a shout.
That's the one for me. I like Donington, but my God, it feels like you're a
mile and a half off the motorway.
Yeah, messing about. Anyway, listen. Have a think. What's the number one? It's not TB, which I was surprised at. Right.
But it can't be Birch. It's not going to be Birch because I was at Birch on the way down to Liverpool on
Birch's. I keep on saying this. Last thing I promise. What used to be great about Birch was that it had a Ladbrokes. A little Ladbrokes in a cabin. Not anymore. Another thing the internet's ruined. Right. Transfer deadline day, Dom. What's going to happen? Let's start with strikers. Load of talk over the weekend and back end of last week about Adam Armstrong. Yes, no. Borough were in for him. Felt pretty early that the summers probably weren't going to add up. Well, Adam Armstrong is, unless anything falls through, it's not Cobham, no, is heading to Wolves. We know there's been talk of German strikers, Hamburg, Mr. Randall Yeboah. I'm not going to try and pronounce the surname. As things stand, though, it's looking unlikely rather than likely that Borough are going to bring her forward in today, isn't it? So just talk us through how they've got to that point and whether you think that's a sensible move or not.
Well, we reported it at the end of last week, didn't we? That I'm laughing here at just all the service stations popping up down the road. I'm going to have to hide these comments here. We'll get back to that. We're going to have to do a special purely on that.
We are.
Live Top Trumps. Come and join us live one night and we'll just have a live game of Top Trumps.
Yeah.
We reported at the end of last week, didn't we, that Borough reached an impasse really in terms of their efforts to sign a striker. Now, that doesn't mean that those efforts haven't continued over the weekend. They absolutely have done, and they will continue today. But you can only sign a striker if the selling club are willing to play ball, and Borough have found this month that just hasn't been the case. So we'll start with Armstrong, obviously. Yeah, Borough were interested, as you reported last week initially, and Armstrong, we understood, was quite keen on the move. Well, really keen on the move, wanted to be back in the northeast. But it always felt like it was going to be a complicated deal to do with Southampton, purely because of the finances of it, really. He's second top scorer in the Championship. He's been playing for Southampton. I know he didn't play on Saturday. I wasn't involved on Saturday. Picked up a knock on Friday, apparently, which obviously set tongues wagging. But Borough had already admitted defeat by that point, really. And then it later came out, 24 hours later, that Wolves were making a move and he was going to Wolves in what looks to be a deal worth £9 million, 7+2 by the looks of it. And I think the thing there is, not only are Borough not going to be able to compete with paying £9 million for a striker who's 29 this month, but they're clearly not going to be able to compete with the wages that Wolves are offering. From what I gather, what Armstrong will get paid at Wolves will be significantly more than what Borough's highest earner is on at the Riverside. Well, not only financially are Borough clearly not going to want to do that this month, but you also have to be very careful with the balance of the dressing room, don't you? From what everything we're told, the harmony in the Borough dressing room at the minute is as good as it's been for a long time. Well, not all the time, but it can have an impact if someone then suddenly arrives, and players know, don't they, on a significantly higher wage than anyone else. That was never going to happen this month anyway. Borough were never going to be in a position to pay that sort of money, obviously. No Championship club, or very few. Birmingham, Wrexham, I think they've actually skewed the market for a lot of other Championship clubs. Haven't they? Ipswich as well, with the money they've looked to throw about this month. They signed Dan Neil last week from Sunderland. That doesn't come cheap. Borough had other targets. Ronald Yeboah Cornickstoffer, I think.
Well done.
I've had a crack. As we reported last week, was one of those. But again, Hamburg didn't want to sell, despite the fact that he's in the last 6 months of his contract. As you reported last week, there were other targets as well. You'd reported that there was 3 targets. But if the club aren't willing to sell, then there's only so much you can do. Borough have done everything in their power so far to sign a striker. Let's see how the final week. You can never say never on deadline day, but as things stand, it looks extremely unlikely. And I'll come back to you on where do you think that leaves Borough? If no striker,
there's an interesting question here, just in the comment section. What's your opinion if we don't sign a striker? From J_Yaj. Some fans see it as a really bad thing, some not. I think my view on it, it's two-sided, really. The way Borough are playing, I do not think that Borough desperately need a striker. There have been far other times in Borough's history when they've gone into a transfer window and you've thought there is a glaring gap there in the squad. They need that. Borough are scoring goals. They're scoring goals from a lot of different positions. Morgan Whittaker, joint second top scorer. Hayden Hackney obviously got the goal at the weekend. And I think part of that is because of the way Tommy Conway plays. Now, we all know the argument that Tommy Conway hasn't scored an awful lot of goals. Yeah, he absolutely hasn't. But I think the way he plays lends itself to other players then being able to score. He ties up defenders. He pulls play around. He links play. He doesn't give defenders a seconds piece. He creates the gaps for Morgan Whittaker to come in from the flank and get shots away. If you start playing with an out-and-out number 9, a pure goal scorer, is that going to affect the balance of the rest of the attack? And are those players going to be less effective? I think there's an argument for that. So I always thought that getting the right striker was going to be difficult for Borough this month because Conway plays. Now, clearly the problem is what happens if Tommy Conway gets injured. If Tommy Conway gets injured, then that goes out the window anyway because you haven't got Conway doing that. And you're then relying on David Strelic and Cali Sen, who, I still feel at the minute I haven't really got a handle on because they just haven't played enough football. Strelic has obviously played more, and there's been games when he's looked really good. There's been games when he's looked a reasonably long way off it. But the reality is he's only just coming back from injury, and he's had his injury issues in the first half of the season. So I think we're in the situation where if everybody stays fit, I don't think Borough need another forward to get up. I think this Borough squad can definitely finish in the top two without anyone else coming in. The issue is, I do think you're leaving yourself vulnerable to a serious injury to Tommy Conway, because I think then all of a sudden you're changing the way that you play, but without a proven replacement to go in and do that job. That's my view on it.
Just one quick one. Borough and Man City have just confirmed that Sverre Nipan has gone back to Manchester City. That loan deal has been terminated by mutual consent. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that, and we'll talk about Seny Dieng, Matt Targett as well, because there's a few questions coming in there on Matt Targett. But yeah, just on the striker front, I completely agree with all of that. I think, as you say, as Borough look now, you look at the squad as it was at the weekend, and you've still got Cali Sen to come back from that. Borough look extremely well placed. You're a Conway injury from that situation changing, and Borough know that. That's why they've made efforts to sign a centre forward this month, but or in the January window. But what has always been clear right from the off, and Kim Hellberg said this to you, didn't he, at his press conference last week? We will only sign the right player. We don't want to sign a player for the sake of it. We've joked about it a couple of times on the vids in the last couple of weeks. Kelechi and Acho, it can. You're at a game tonight, Sunderland game, and it reminded me of the last time I was at a game on deadline day, which I think was 2017 when Borough played West Brom. I think it was a 0-0 draw in the Premier League season. That day Borough signed Adlani Guediora. Signing a player on deadline day is not always better than not signing a player on deadline day.
Well, especially as well, as we alluded to last week, that if you're bringing in it's less risky with a loan. Clearly less risky with a loan. If you're making a permanent signing, then, the problem is that Borough want to be in the Premier League next year. Well, as we said when we were discussing the Armstrong situation, hopefully this summer, Borough are in a situation where they're shopping in a completely different market and looking to do completely different things with their squad because they're in. Now, I know the counter argument of that is you've got to get there first, and a striker who guarantees you 12 goals between now and the end of the season might be the difference in getting you there. Yeah, I fully appreciate that. But if you're signing them on a 4-year deal and making them your top wage earner, which, you probably got to do if you're going to sign the type of striker who's going to near enough guarantee you that between now and the end of the season, then you're massively impinging what you do in the summer, regardless of what division you're in. So I think that's coming to Borough's thinking as well, and understandably so.
The other thing as well, and I think if you're looking to bring in a centre forward, so if you're bringing in a domestic player, if you're bringing in a striker from the Premier League or from the Championship, an Armstrong, a Rhodes like Borough did the last time they won promotion, there's a premium. There's a premium if you're buying one of the best players in the Championship, obviously, and there's a premium if you're buying a domestic player from the Premier League. So you look overseas, like Borough clearly have this month, but then there's also got to be an acceptance. Strelic, Sen, Latte, that players need time. So even if you did bring someone in from overseas, you're fleshing out the squad. You're clearly bringing in someone who you think's good enough, who you think's going to have an impact longer term, but can they hit the ground running? There's no time at all to settle, is there? And I know we touched on this previously, Sunderland last year. So we've talked about this a lot, haven't we? The similarities between Sunderland last season and Borough this season, and there are plenty. But there's another this month with the centre forward search. I think Sunderland's need last year was greater than Borough's need now.
Yeah, well, they were further back, weren't they? They were.
Well, they only had 2 strikers as well, didn't
Yeah.
they? In Isidore and Mayenda. And they signed Jayden Danns on loan from Liverpool, but he was injured. He didn't kick a ball. But again, the discussions were being had then, weren't they, by Sunderland supporters? Like, is this the chance? Is this the best chance we're going to get? Do we need to take the punt now to bring someone in? Are we risking missing out on a once in a decade opportunity? But Sunderland obviously went on to win promotion. But Borough clearly, if Tommy Conway gets injured in the next week, then clearly the picture looks very different. But I don't think, as things stand, Borough are going to get to the end of the season and a lack of goals will be their undoing. I don't think that'll be the case.
I mean, just the last one on the strike. The Dan's one you talk about there, yeah, it didn't work for Sunderland. He got injured. He didn't kick a ball. In a way, that's the ideal type, though, for January, because in some ways it's a no-lose, really, because it's a Premier League player on loan. It's only for 4 months. Yes, there's the wages, but it's you're not committing yourself long term. I think the other problem Borough have found is, where are those players at this month? Can you think of a single Premier League striker that's gone on loan to a Championship club so far this month?
Well, the one that's been mentioned a couple of times to me is like Will Lancashire, but he's already on loan in the Championship at Oxford from Tottenham. So then there's an extra level of complication there, clearly.
Ending it to come back. I mean, it just feels like this window, those type of players haven't been there for a variety of reasons. I think, a lot of Premier League clubs have played so much football that they've got injury issues of their own and don't want to let, any player who's remotely near the first team out. I think that's a problem. Willa Sula at Newcastle, someone like that, normally would have been absolutely earmarked for a loan. Well, my understanding is Newcastle have no interest in loan. They might sell him abroad on deadline day and bring some money in for him. But the idea of, well, there's a player on the fringe of a Premier League team, might he be able to come in and do a job for you? Those players just aren't moving on loan this month.
On the subject of loanees, then, let's talk about Sverre Nipan, because he has gone back to Manchester City, which was always going to be the case, wasn't it? I'm just going to see whether Manchester City have said anything in their statement or whether they've just confirmed that he's gone back. Obviously, he joined City for £12 million in the summer. Borough joined on loan, and Borough were delighted. Sorry, I'll get rid of that comment. That's still there. Borough were over the moon, weren't they, to sign Nipan in the summer, and rightly so. Hugely talented teenager. Man City had beaten some of Europe's biggest clubs to sign him. Just hasn't worked out, which we'll get to. He will now return to Manchester, where his development will be overseen by Pep Guardiola and the City first team staff. So it looks like he's going to spend the second half of the season. I don't think he can play because of the homegrown quota. I don't think he can play for City. Not that he would anyway in the second half of the season, but that suggests he's not going out on loan anyway. I've said this a couple of times. I just wonder with Nipan whether Borough got him a year or two too early.
Yeah, it feels like. I mean, there must be a player there, mustn't there? I haven't watched his games in Norway enough to know what convinced City to sign him. But Manchester City's scouting network, all the data at their disposal, all of that. For them to have spent the money that they did on him, they must be convinced there's a player there. You're right. We haven't seen it. It's going to be interesting to see what he develops into, because players do develop at completely different rates. What I've got to say about it is, I think my understanding, I'm sure it's yours as well, is, there's absolutely been nothing wrong with his attitude, his willingness to listen to instructions, his willingness to work. It's nothing like that. It's just whenever he's come on the pitch, he just hasn't looked up to it, has he? Which, I keep coming back to it. He clearly is technically, but it just feels like at the minute he's not ready for what you need in the Championship. Borough's squad is very tight. Even though he's a young player, because he's a loanee, he has to be in that squad if they want to play him. So he was taking up a squad place that's at a premium. I would imagine, understandably, he'll have been growing increasingly unhappy, frustrated, worried about his form, whatever. I think it's best for everyone that he goes back, because it wasn't working. And, he wasn't even getting on off the bench anymore, let's be honest, was he? Unused sub again at the weekend. It feels like the right move.
Yeah, just this from Michael. Was it right that City approached Borough on Neep? And if so, why did they think Borough was the right option for him? Yeah, there was kind of a mutual agreement there in the summer, wasn't there? Borough wanted Neep, and Borough had scouted Neep previously, but then I think quickly became aware that clearly they weren't going to be able to live with some of the clubs that were in for him. And all of Europe's biggest clubs, or certainly the vast majority of them, seemed to be linked with him or interested in him at one point, didn't they? But then when he went to Manchester City, Borough kind of speculatively made the call, and Borough have a good relationship with Man City, and they found that the prospect of actually him going out on loan to Borough had already been discussed. City thought it was a good move, and that relationship, is still very much intact and healthy. There's an acceptance, isn't there, that sometimes loan moves just don't work out. Sometimes loan moves go a lot better than you expected. Other times they don't work out at all. We've talked about Hayden Hackney, haven't we, previously? Borough have signed loan players in the past where they've probably exceeded expectations, and others like this one where it just hasn't quite worked out. Seny Dieng, Feyenoord, that one seems a bit of a bolt from the blue, really, in the last couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, this is one I'm not saying we got wrong, but I wrote a piece on Sunday morning. Certainly the suggestion on Saturday night was, we don't think Dieng's good. We don't think we're going to be. Borough have been desperate to get Seny Dieng out of the club. There's absolutely no doubt about that. He's fallen so far down the pecking order. He wasn't going to be playing. He because of the kind of point at which he signed that contract. He's been on really good money. He still had 18 months to go. There was a real desire to get Seny Dieng out of the club. Talks with Hull at the start of the month. For a while, it looked like that might happen. The finances just couldn't be made to work. I was hearing, at the start of the weekend, there was a kind of grudging acceptance from Borough that probably was not going to happen. Well, that all changed yesterday. Feyenoord came in. I think they've decided they need an alternative goalkeeping option. Their number one hasn't really been working out for them. Borough kind of jumped at it. Yeah, can we make this happen? I'm told that actually the financial aspects of that deal were sorted out reasonably quickly. That then led to Dieng going over. He's over there at the minute. He's having a medical this morning. Borough fully expect that to go through. And I think the important thing to say here as well is, when that goes through, Borough will be doing what they can to bring in another goalkeeper. I'm told that they've got a clear number one option. I've got to admit, all my hands up, don't know who it is yet. And there's a confidence that deal is pretty much hit the green button. It'll happen once they absolutely know Dieng's going. So watch this space for that one. Now, clearly, he will be a number two. Sol Brynn is Borough's number one. At the minute, it's John McLaughlin on the bench. Borough like McLaughlin. They think he's done a really, really good job in terms of being, supporting that goalkeeping unit, in training, heavily involved, stuff like that. The age that he is now, would you want John McLaughlin being your number one keeper for the second half of the season if something happened to Sol Brynn? Well, Borough have obviously decided no. And that's, not really a slight on McLaughlin. He wasn't really brought in to be that anyway. So that's why that's happening. And like I say, there's it feels like there's confidence that deal will happen once Dieng's kind of signed and sealed.
Yeah, because you just couldn't risk, Brynn gets injured or suspended. McLaughlin's your only other senior keeper on the books. It's not only a case of like whether McLaughlin's ready to play. Alan Brown will probably play.
I like that. Yeah.
But it's then who's the third keeper? Like Shea Connor is clearly highly rated at the club, but it's a big step to go in and potentially play for a promotion chasing championship club, isn't it? So yeah, that's the situation with Dieng. Matt Targett, that's the other one. So I was at Liverpool Newcastle on Saturday night, and after the game asked Eddie Howe if there was any update on the Matt Targett situation. Just for the background there, I'm sure you're aware. Obviously, there was a recall clause this month. It was due to be earlier in the month, but Newcastle extended that deadline. Just because they were in the midst of an injury crisis at the time, had 4 recognised defenders fit. Lewis Miley was playing in defence. That situation is a lot clearer and more positive for them now. Dan Burns back. Others aren't too far away. Sven Botman was on the bench at the weekend, but that was just through thigh tightness rather than anything else. But on Saturday, when Howe was asked, will you be recalling Matt Targett? Has a decision been made there? He said that we will continue to discuss that until the deadline. Well, this morning, Craig Hope in the Daily Mail is saying that Newcastle will not be recalling Matt Targett from his loan at Borough. if that is the case, from what I gather, Borough haven't had any indication either way. But the feeling is at Borough, if Targett was going to be recalled, he would have been recalled by now. Newcastle wouldn't do it this late in the window. So the expectation clearly is now that Matt Targett is going to see out the season at Borough, which is obviously a major boost for Borough and for Targett as well, because he loves it here. He's a major part of the team. He's playing regularly, and he's out of contract in the summer, so he's playing for his future as well at Borough or elsewhere. You know, from what I gather, that Targett's longer term future hasn't been discussed yet, and you know, why would it? He's out of contract in the summer. You park that until the end of the season, don't you, and discuss it then. So that there's reports saying that he'll sign a permanent deal beyond this season. From what I gather, you know, that isn't something that's been discussed yet. But in the short term, this is great news for Borough and for Targett.
Yes, it is. It's a massive positive for Borough. You know, for lots of different reasons. You know, they've got a player there who's been absolutely massive to what they've been doing so far this season. He's experienced. He's a leader. He's not going to be fazed by the you know, high pressure games at the end of a promotion season. We've already seen how versatile he is. Left back, left wing back, centre half, can do all of those jobs. As you say, you know, he's clearly really enjoying it at Borough. If Borough were going out now and signing Matt Targett on deadline day, you'd be saying, God, that's a good signing. That's a really good signing. You know, that's exactly the type of player you want in the nitty gritty of a promotions push. Well, holding on to him is every bit as important as that. And that's before the fact that had he gone, you know, yesterday, it would have been an absolute nightmare for Borough. Yes, they've done all their work. They had options lined up, but actually getting them over the line on deadline day and signing a player who's able to, you know, do what Matt Targett is doing, that, you know, it's massive that he's staying. It's absolutely massive that he's staying. And you know, credit for Borough to kind of sticking with it and clearly keeping the relationship with Newcastle at a really good level, so that, you know, for all that Newcastle have been making the noise about recalling him, we've always said, our understanding has always been that actually Newcastle would rather have done the right thing by Targett and Borough. It always felt like a real last resort for Newcastle to push the button. And, you know, they would have done it. Football's a cutthroat business. If they'd had to, they would have done. But, you know, I think the strength of the relationship and probably Targett's real desire to stay at Borough have been important in that decision.
A few other bits then before we wrap up. I saw it once in the comments. I might struggle to find it again now. I should have flagged it at the time. Hayden Hackney staying. We haven't talked about it. But we should now, after what he did at the weekend and what he said at the weekend after the game. And you wrote then, didn't you, that the fact that there's been silence really on Hackney's transfer future up until the point afterwards when he made it clear that he had no intentions of going anywhere at all. It's clearly a huge, huge boost to come out of this month, because there are very few, if any, better players in the Championship.
I loved Kim Elberg's answer in the press conference when he was asked about Hackney. You know, Hackney was brilliant, not just the goal, again, driving Borough forward, bossing the midfield. He's just so elegant when he's running forward with the ball and that. So Hellberg's asked about his performance. He says a couple of things, and he says he's too good to be here. And then he kind of stopped himself, and I think he realised, I shouldn't. How, you know, that can sound really disrespectful. And I didn't mean it like that. All I meant was he's good enough to play in any Premier League team. Put him in any Premier League team. I think he'd handle himself over. And you just felt like saying, it's all right. You don't have to explain. You don't have to explain yourself with that. You ask any Borough fan, and they'll say he's too good to be playing in the Championship. He just is. You know what? Hayden Hackney turning down Ipswich in the summer might end up being the single most decisive thing in a season that hopefully ends with promotion. Because, you know, I do think at the minute he's the best player in the Championship. You know, there are probably players at other clubs who are more important to that club, if you know what I mean. But I think Hackney is playing at a level at the minute that is just, every time you watch Borough play, he looks like the best player on the pitch. And you know, what more do you want to say than that? And on top of that, he couldn't be more passionate and driven about what it would mean to him to get Borough into the Premier League. You know, I think he knows deep down that if that doesn't happen this year, it's probably never going to happen because he is going to be off in the summer. This is his one chance to, lead Borough into the Premier League. I think, probably from speaking to people like Dale, he knows what it was like last time around when it happened. He knows what it meant to someone like Dale Fry and the other local lads in that Karanka squad to get up. And I think he's just desperate to experience it.
This is a really good point, because I was just going to say, it feels like Hackney's gone up a level. It feels like he's gone up a level this season and then gone up another level since Hellberg came in. Hackney is a gift to Hellberg and Hellberg is a gift to Hackney. The prospect of Borough going up with a homegrown captain, a homegrown keeper, Dale Fry still a key player. Oh, be some weekend and Teesside that, but let's hold that thought for now.
Yes.
Couple of other bits just before we wrap up. Fair few saying this just on the game on Saturday. We obviously haven't talked about it. We'll do a vid later in the week where we'll obviously talk more bigger picture. But South Stand on Saturday was as good as it's been this season. Everyone stayed back after the final whistle. Massive. A few of my mates were there were saying that the atmosphere
was brilliant. It really was. It was class when Borough were on top in the first half. It was even better when it got a little bit edgy in that last 15 minutes. I was pains to say in the stuff that I wrote, it wasn't like Borough were under siege, but the game had tilted a bit. Norwich were pressing, a couple of late chances. The crowd then, the kind of roars when Dale Fry made that block with about a minute left was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
And just on the subject of transfers, if you haven't seen this good spot from Andy, really like the way Holloway has spoken about Finn Munro being complimentary about Borough for recognising his talent. You might have seen another Ian Holloway clip doing the rounds at the weekend. Did you see that? His blast after Saturday. But at the end of last week, he was also talking about Finn Munro, who obviously was on loan at his Swindon team in the first half of the season. And he said, well done to Middlesbrough for recognising his quality. Aston Villa, you should be ashamed of yourselves. You let go one of the best future left-backs I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I've seen a few. Some of them played in the Premier League with me and for me. I think they've made a terrible blunder. And clearly Munro is...
He's annoyed, isn't he?
Is one for the future, but yeah, safe to say that Holloway is a big fan there. Just to wrap up then, a couple of bits. Micah Hamilton, you want to potentially watch in deadline day. Peterborough were linked yesterday. A few other League One clubs sniffing. Clearly, Borough aren't going to stand in his way. I think it's 4 games now that he hasn't been in the squad. He got his chance on Boxing Day.
I mean, that's the thing. He had that. Admittedly, it wasn't much of a chance. It was, but he was put back into the team. Hellberg has had a look at him. I mean, you never want to completely write a player off, but it feels like Hamilton's had his chances now, doesn't it? It feels like if he was going to have, in any way, shape or form, stepped in and proved that he can do a job, it would have happened by now. It's a number of managers who've decided he's not ready.
In terms of the squad then, the 25-man squad, because obviously that was maxed out in the first half of the season. So Bergzorg has gone from that now. Sverre Nipan, because he was a loan player, is obviously included. He's gone from that now. That creates space for Malanda and Sarmiento. Dieng would obviously be deregistered, but if and when Borough sign a goalkeeper to replace him, if that deal goes through, the Dieng deal, then that's like for like as well. So as things stand, you're looking at 25 for 25. But let's watch this space. Hamilton's obviously registered, so if Hamilton was to move on today, that'd create a space. But as we said right at the start, if you just joined us now, we talked at length about the striker situation at the start. So as we said at the start, Borough will only look to bring in someone today if an opportunity appeals itself. That Borough deem too good to turn down. A bit of love for Kim Hellberg coming through in the comments. Brian Clough was more important Nottingham Forest than any of the players in his team. The same can be said about Kim Hellberg. If you are just joining us, by the way, you missed some cracking Top Trump service station chat.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up with this. Because I was going to leave it, but to be fair,
someone got it.
Oh, a couple. Freddie Forbes, 5508, yes. And I did see one more. Bear with me. There's definitely been 2. And Charles Abberton, 7149. It's Gloucester.
Yes.
Gloucester. So Bristol City away. Maybe Cardiff and Swansea if you go in that kind of neck of the woods, that route. Gloucester. On the M5 it'll be, won't it? Yeah.
What makes it so good?
I'm gonna have to go and find it now. I should have had it on the top, shouldn't I? Hold on. Bear with me. There's 55 of these. It outranks. There we are, Gloucester. Price, 10. Ambience, 9. Cleanliness, 10. Food outlets, 9. Parking spaces, 970. It is no surprise that Gloucester Services scooped the highly coveted top spot of the Which Best and Worst service stations for 3 years in a row from 2021.
There you go. There you go.
There you
so
go.
when's Borough's next trip? When will Borough?
Yeah.
Does Borough have any Gloucester? Oh, that's one for the next one, isn't it? To have a
Isn't
dig
it?
through Borough's fixtures and work
Isn't
out
it?
when we
So,
can next to the stop off.
If anybody in this vid on the people who watch this, if you're at Gloucester Services, then we want a picture and we want a review fed into the next vid, because I'm positive, and I think it's a bit like TB, where I think it's like a bit farm shoppy, a bit.
It is farm shoppy, yeah. I was going to say that, yeah.
I think it's
which surprises me about the price. Which surprises me about the price, but then you know, I'm a Teessider. I don't like spending money. I couldn't believe it when I was in Starbucks last week and had to pay
if you're getting a trendy sausage roll, Dom, you got to pay for it.
This is true. It's our dream now, isn't it, to do a You Are My Borough live from Gloucester Services at some point in the future. Can we ever make it work? Can we ever make it work?
That's what we'll do. Yeah, that's what we'll do.
Sarah missed the beginning, but loved Gloucester Services. Well, right, we could chunt her on for another 20 minutes, but not about transfers, but about service stations. So we'll wrap up there. We probably won't jump back on today unless something major and probably unexpected happens. If there is a twist, we'll jump back on at some point. But if there isn't, we will be. I'm just thinking, if someone joins us now and all they see is 907 out of 10 in the bottom left corner, we'll get rid of that. If you don't hear from us again today, then we'll be back later this week just with our regular episode, looking ahead to the Sheffield United game, which feels massive again now, does it? Hull play Watford on Tuesday night. Obviously, that's Hull's game in hand. Watford managerless, obviously, of course. Again, after
you did say on the last vid, don't forget about Hull. To be fair, they're third now.
They play 2 home games, so they play twice before Borough play again, don't they? I think they're
all right, do they?
Watford and then Bristol City on Saturday.
Oh yeah, of course, with Borough playing on Monday. Yeah, of course they will. Yeah.
Yeah, so Borough could do with a favour from Charlie Taylor, Adrian Mariappa. Did I see? Former Bristol City defender. He'll have stopped at Gloucester Services a couple of times in his career, I'm sure. So yeah, we'll be back.
That would be stopping at Watford Gap.
We'll be back later this week with another episode of You Are My Borough, looking ahead to the weekend games. Thanks for joining us today. We're live all day, by the way, on the Borough blog, transfer developments through the day there, not just at Borough, but around the Championship as well. So I'll shot that link in the notes so you can follow that throughout the day. Still that offer, by the way, for subscribers, still just £3 for 3 months. There's a discount for the full year as well. Again, I'll shop those notes, that link in the notes, and any support there is much appreciated. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the comments. Take care.